In IT, we use a lot of software, from monitoring and observability to CLI tooling and even our ticketing systems. Today, I want to show a high-level overview of how we can leverage the Ansible automation platform to tie all these tools together to deliver true end-to-end automated workflows. One of my favorite features of the automation platform is something called Event-Driven Ansible. For the first demonstration, I'm going to request a virtual machine from a ServiceNow catalog item. And in order to facilitate that connection, we have something called an event stream. An event stream is basically a unique API or webhook endpoint that we can use in the various third-party integrations for them to send data to the platform that we can then parse and launch some sort of automation in response to that event coming in. So before we dive into this, I'm going to go ahead and go to ServiceNow and actually request a virtual machine first. So I'm going to fill out this form here. We're going to say demo server 2. I'm going to use the default Windows Server template. I'm going to use a large instance for this deployment, and I'm going to leave it on the default VMware cluster that I have in the catalog. So I'm going to click Order Now. And what's happening behind the scenes in ServiceNow is there's a business rule that's listening to any catalog requests made by my user. It's going to convert them to JSON and pass it over to that unique endpoint that's available in the platform for ServiceNow. With this event stream, it's going to be mapped to something called a rulebook activation. And these are essentially processes that run 24/7 listening to those incoming events. And we can use this rulebook to parse the payload and trigger automation in response to specific data that might be coming in. If we come over and switch to the Jobs tab, you'll see that a workflow did just kick off from that request from ServiceNow. So while this is running, I want to go through a couple components so that we can be familiar with the environment, because this is going to take a couple of minutes. So we have ServiceNow, but I also have another piece of software called NetBox. So this is a source of truth software. You'll see I have a pre-existing virtual machine here. If I hit refresh, you'll see that demo server 2 has been created in this system. I also have a monitoring system that has the pre-existing virtual machine in here that's monitoring some information that we care about. I also have VMware, of course, and if we take a look at the tasks, you'll see that virtual machine has been deployed. It's going to be going through the sysprep process shortly, so it's going to have the IP address and host name filled out when it's completed. So if we take a look at what's happened so far, I went into NetBox and I created that virtual machine instance first. Then, using a feature of the automation platform called Dynamic Inventory, I was able to sync all that metadata from NetBox into the automation platform as inventory hosts. And then if we click into this Terraform apply job here, and I open this up, you're going to see I've got both of those virtual machines and all of their associated metadata available for this job template, which is what is getting passed into the Terraform module to deploy the virtual machines. So if we go back to this workflow, if we look at what is coming up next, it's going to connect into VMware and actually do the same inventory sync mechanism to bring extra metadata from the VMware side for those hosts into the automation platform. And then we're going to go ahead and create a ServiceNow record for that virtual machine. We're going to install my monitoring agent on the new VM, and then use the API of the monitoring system to now onboard that device to start monitoring it. So while this is continuing to run, I'm going to go ahead and switch to VS Code so we can take a look at the Terraform module as an example first. So you'll see it's going to loop through each virtual machine instance, and it's going to map all that data into the various variables that are required for the module to run. The other important component here is if I go into the ServiceNow rulebook, we can take a look at the structure here. So in a rulebook, it's going to look very similar to a playbook, but we have a concept of sources and rules. So if we take a look at the first source here, I've got a source called webhook. So any webhooks that get sent into this rulebook will be processed by this set of rules. So if we take a look at the first example for provision virtual machine, I'm checking the payload to see if the requester was me, and if the catalog item from ServiceNow was called VM provision, and if the event that's getting passed in happens to be service catalog, we're going to actually run a workflow template called VM provision under the default organization, and it's going to be able to map some of the data from that payload as extra variables. So you'll see I've got an underscore hosts variable that's getting mapped to that host name parameter from the survey. I've got the ServiceNow request name, and I also have a list with one item called virtual machines that's going to take the host name, the cluster, the VM size, and some custom fields that are used inside of NetBox. If we switch back here and we take a look at our inventory, and I go to demo server 2, you're going to see all this payload data coming back from NetBox with all the interface information, disk information, IP address, CPU and RAM. And let's see if this is done. You'll see now that we are installing the monitoring agent, and it looks like the VM record has been created in ServiceNow. So while this is running, I'll go switch over there and take a look at my virtual machine instances. You'll see I've got demo server 1 and demo server 2 with the CPU count, the memory, and the disk. And finally, it's going to go ahead and connect to the monitoring system and add that device so that it can start monitoring it. So if I switch over to my monitoring system, you'll see that now demo server 2 exists. So it's going to take a moment for it to discover. So see now that we've got an end-to-end process of I requested a virtual machine. It was able to put it in multiple sources of truth, NetBox and ServiceNow. I was able to take that data into the platform and apply that with Terraform. And then I was able to onboard it into my monitoring system so that we can start getting metrics and health for this system. Now, another use case that I have this first virtual machine for, which is a full VM clone, I want to show you how you can do something like handling incidents that happen in the environment. So if we switch to this machine in Windows, you'll see that it has that 35 gigabytes of disk space. I've only got 12 gigabytes of storage free. This is a very small template. So I want to simulate what would happen if this disk gets full and how the automation platform can help me remediate this. So if I switch back over to my job templates, I have a utility in here called create file. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I'm going to drop a 10 gigabyte file on that demo server 1 machine. So I'll click next and finish. To see we're connecting into the system, we're checking if the temporary file exists already, and you'll see that a file was dropped on the operating system of the given size. So if I switch back to the Windows machine and I hit refresh, you'll notice that I've only got 2 gigabytes of space free now. If I switch back to my monitoring system and we go to demo server 1, you'll see there's already an alarm that's been thrown. And if we take a look at the C drive, it's at 92.93% utilized. And I have a threshold that says if the last poll is greater than or equal to 80% utilized, it's going to throw an alert. So using that same event stream concept, my monitoring system is able to send an event to the automation platform to handle remediation. So if I switch back over here and go to my jobs, you're going to see that there's a workflow that kicked off. And if I go to my details, you'll see that the event came in for a threshold alert that was sent for this server, for this drive, and it shows the current percentage utilization and the threshold from the monitoring system. And with that information, I was able to go into ServiceNow and create an incident. I went into NetBox to increase the disk size for that individual item. Then I go through to sync the inventory again, so I have the up-to-date disk information. And now I pass that metadata into Terraform to do a Terraform apply. So if we come in here and go to details, or if we go into the details of the run and I open this VM, you'll see if we compare the virtual machines, it now has a disk size of 56 gigabytes compared to the original 35. And because Terraform was able to apply with this new data, it was able to actually increase the disk size on VMware. And then we go back into ServiceNow to update the incident. And then I go into the virtual machine to actually expand the partition. And then I go ahead and close out the ServiceNow incident. So to confirm this, I can switch back to the Windows server and I can hit refresh, and you'll see we're back to an acceptable disk utilization percentage. And if we switch over to ServiceNow and I go into my incidents, you'll see I have a new incident for demo server 1 with that disk utilization exceeding 80%. If I click into it, you'll see that the initial incident was created, Ansible was used to expand the disk on the hypervisor, and then the partition on the operating system has been expanded. So I'm able to take an anomaly or issue from my monitoring system. I'm able to not only remediate, but create an incident and close it out with documentation on steps that were taken. Now, to show another example of how we can take this full circle, I also have a catalog item in here where I can go to deprovision a virtual machine or decommission a virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and select Demo Server 2 and Order Now. And this is going to follow the same exact process. So if I switch over to my jobs, you're going to see that a VM deprovision workflow is running. And you'll see it's going to go into ServiceNow and remove the VM record. It's going to remove the node from my monitoring system. It's also going to remove it from NetBox. We're going to sync that inventory again, do another Terraform apply. And if we click on the metadata for this job, you'll see that that second machine is no longer present. And if we switch over to VMware, you'll see that the virtual machine is going to be powered down and deleted, and it is now. And if we scroll down and take a look at the output for Terraform, you're going to see that the virtual machine is being destroyed. And then we're going to synchronize the inventory. So now if I come into my inventory in AAP, you're going to see that that host is no longer present. We can see that in the monitoring system, that host is gone. We can see in NetBox that the host has also been removed. So now we have full end-to-end provisioning, decommissioning, and also handling anomalies like a disk getting filled. Hopefully this was helpful and maybe gave you some ideas of things you can do with the automation platform you might not be doing today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those below. Thanks for watching.